Okay, welcome back to my look at the Adventurer Conqueror King system. It's been a lengthy endeavor to get some characters made and equipped, and we looked at spells, and then we started looking at what it takes to go into dungeons in the wilderness and encountering things. But what happens when that all fails? Combat is what happens. So, let's get right into it. When adventurers have an encounter with monsters, it often results in combat. Participants in combat are called combatants. Using the rules, you can resolve combat between scores of combatants. For larger scale battles with hundreds to thousands, see page 461. Alright. Combat in Acts 2 can be enjoyed as a tactical war game on a battle map, analog or virtual, with counters, figures, or tokens to represent the exact position of the combatants throughout the combat, or purely in the imagination via theater of the mind. Alright, so most of these rules are going to be useful for on a battle map, so that does seem to be the default assumption, I think, for the game, which is kind of, I think, maybe that's sort of stepping away a bit from most OSR games, which I think lean more towards theater of the mind in general. I can't, yeah, I mean, most games that I've read actually don't mention square grids and you know, rules for grid movement and stuff, so I think theater is just assumed. All right, so each square on a battle map represents 5x5 area, blah, blah, blah. Being within 5 feet of an enemy can trigger the engage condition. A combatant in a square adjacent to the front of an enemy combatant will generally be engaged with that enemy. Combatant frontage and interval. By tradition, the miniatures and virtual tokens typically used for man-sized combatants occupy a 5x5 square on the battle map. However, a 5-foot frontage is considerably larger than most historical combatants occupied in battle. In actuality, a man-sized combatant armed with a large bludgeoning or slashing weapon requires a full 5 square frontage, but a man-sized combatant armed with a small or medium weapon or piercing weapon only requires 3-foot frontage. Therefore, Acts 2 permits 3 such combatants to fight in formation along 2 adjacent 5-foot squares. To represent this on the battle map, place one combatant's figure in one square, the second combatant's figure in the other square, and the third combatant's figure on the line between the two. Yes, I see that. Interesting. That is assuming that they have such weapons. So that's small or medium or piercing, including spears of any kind. But if you have a large weapon, bludgeoning or slashing, then you got to take up the whole square to yourself. Likewise, a 5-foot interval between troops is considerably greater than many historical combat formations used. Man-sized combatants can actually organize into ranks at 3-foot intervals. This narrow interval enables combatants in the second rank equipped with polearms or spears to attack opponents in the enemy formation. Therefore, Acts 2 permits up to 3 ranks of man-sized combatants per 10 feet. To represent this on the battle map, place a second rank combatant's figure so that its base is overlapping the base of the figure to its front. A second rank combatant armed with a long weapon can then attack targets as if it were occupying the space of the figure to its front. Large, huge, gigantic, and colossal targets occupy more spaces on the battle map. By default, large creatures take up 2 squares, 2x1 or 1x2. Huge creatures take up 2x2, gigantic 4x3 or 3x4, and colossal up to 60 squares or more, 10x6 at least. The image below shows the default space requirements for each size of combatant. Alright, so again, I think this is also a bit different compared to 5th edition and a lot of like more modern tactical RPGs like this. Usually everything is based on just squares, right? You're normal size, you take up 1 square. You're large, you take up 4 squares. You're bigger than that, you take up 9 squares. Everything is just squares. This, however, we're getting rectangles going, which is more realistic. Definitely, but it's also probably more annoying, I think, because I feel like most VTTs are going to be based around square things and, you know, linear scaling. Here's where we get really different, though. Each combatant on the battle map has a facing, which represents its directional orientation, and a field of view, which represents the arc on the battle map within which it can claim line of sight on other combatants. A combatant's facing determines its flanks and rear, as shown on the image below. A combatant's field of view encompasses only his front and flank squares. Therefore, he does not have line of sight on units approaching from his rear, which can leave him vulnerable to certain attacks. Okay, so we have here this guy facing straight down. He's got the 3 in the front, 2 on the flank, 3 in the rear. But then this guy's at an angle, so he's got these 3 in the front, these 2 as his flank, these 3 as his rear. Mechanically, it's not really difficult to process that, right? There's only so many directions you can face on a square system like this. But the really tricky thing is ensuring and understanding that facing matters in a game like this, which is very alien to probably many players, because usually you just throw out figures, and oftentimes you'll kind of face them towards, you know, where they're meant to be looking. You don't usually like purposefully face a miniature away from where they're kind of attacking. But here it actually matters, and I think that's pretty uncommon. Passage of lines. A man-sized combatant can move through a space occupied by an ally or between spaces occupied by 2 adjacent allies. However, a man-sized combatant cannot move through 2 spaces occupied by 3 adjacent allies. The tight 3-foot wide frontage prevents passage of lines. This forces combatants to decide if they want a looser battle line that permits traverse, or a tighter formation that puts more fighting power per square. So you can move through a single ally, or you can move between a space occupied by 2 adjacent allies. But once you put 3 together, that's when it's just a brick wall, no matter what. But you can put 3 together so that they can all attack like the same target as a unit. Interesting. Again, I feel like this leans a bit more towards larger scale battles. Because I think if you just have 4 characters and that's it, like, it doesn't matter too much. But again, keep in mind, you're often kind of expected to have mercenaries or henchmen with you and things like that. So there's often going to be larger skirmishes. A combatant larger than man size can move through spaces occupied by allies at least 2 categories smaller, provided there are enough contiguous unoccupied spaces to accommodate at least 1/2 the combatant's frontage. What a sentence. A combatant larger than man size can end its movement overlapping with allies, provided there are enough unoccupied spaces to accommodate at least 1/2 of its base. Okay. Orm is an ancient dragon of colossal size with a frontage of 6 squares. Yes. Number of his orc minions have taken up positions in front of him. Orm can move through the first rank of orcs because there are at least 3 empty spaces, but not through the second rank. Can end his initiative overlapping with the orcs because at least 1/2 his base is in empty spaces. Okay. Well, that example does kind of clear that up. Again, these are pretty fringe scenarios that are going to arise. How often are you going to be even fighting something this size, especially early on? But okay, so that's all the movement between, facing, line of sight, all that stuff. So that means that if with facing rules, that means the explorer can just shoot dudes in the back and get an extra die of damage? Hold on, let me look at this. Ambushing. An explorer can ambush any vulnerable opponent. Yeah, I mean, as far as I understand it. Now, what is vulnerable? Well, we'd have to go to the conditions list, which is massive, by the way. Also, like the largest condition screen I've ever seen, or condition list. Vulnerable. You can be ambushed or backstabbed by creatures capable of doing so. All attack throws against vulnerable creatures gain a +2 bonus, or +4 if the attacker ambushes or backstabs. And additional damage from ambush or backstab. You're vulnerable anytime you're cowering, drowning, grabbed, helpless, paralyzed, petrified, prone, restrained, slumbering, surprised, stuck, unconscious, webbed, or wrestled. So a lot of shit can make you vulnerable. It's a very common thing. And then no matter what, I mean, everybody's getting a +2 bonus against you. Now it's including prone, so yeah. And grabbed. I can't wait to get to the grabbing rules here. But you're also vulnerable to a particular opponent if you are attacking from the rear, or you've enthralled the creature, or clambering onto the creature. A creature is never flanked and vulnerable to the same opponent. Vulnerable condition takes precedence. Okay, so flanked is also its own thing. Attack throws against flanked creatures get a +2 bonus. Okay, so if you don't have ambush or backstab, anywhere but the front is where you want to be fighting, because you're going to get the +2. But keep in mind, enemies also get that. And so that's why fighting in groups of 3 like that linked together is pretty powerful. Boy, that is meaty, I gotta say. That is meaty. Okay, moving on to rounds and initiative. Combat is resolved in a series of sequential units of time called rounds. A round is a brief interval of time in which flurries of activity are punctuated by pauses and lulls. It can be brief as 10 to 15 seconds, as long as a minute or two. During each round, each combatant gets an initiative segment, usually just called your initiative, during which you have an opportunity to take 1 or more actions. During each round, gameplay proceeds through the following steps. Pre-initiative declarations. So if you want to cast a spell or engage in defensive movement, such as undertaking the retreat or withdrawing actions, in the upcoming round, must publicly inform the judge before initiative dice are rolled. Other actions do not have to be declared in advance. Okay. So mostly just casting spells. I don't know how often you're going to retreat or withdraw or anything. After pre-initiative declarations, each combatant rolls 1d6 to determine your initiative number. This is adjusted by dex modifier, certain special abilities or proficiencies. In larger combats, judge might roll 1d6 for each party-sized group of monsters instead of for each individual monster. Judge begins calling out the initiative number, starting with 10, 9, 8, so on. I assume it mentions ties at some point. When the initiative count concludes, the judge checks morale for any combatants who have suffered enough damage and or lost enough allies that they might withdraw or flee. Okay, that's a good thing to read. I often do morale checks when it's the creature's turn, and then they decide what they're doing on that turn. This does the morale check at the end of the round. And then, I don't know, we'd have to see, do they flee immediately, even though it's like the end of the round, or do they, or do they then wait for their turn, and this is just determining ahead of time? My god, this section is big. We're gonna be here all decade. Okay, so depending on okay, this is an interest. It's not just succeed or fail for morale. There's different results here. Frightened retreat means creature becomes frightened. They cannot attack, cast spells, or speak, except to scream in stark terror. They will run from the enemy at their full speed until they're no longer pursued by any enemies or 1d10 rounds pass. Okay, it sounds like that takes place on their turn then. They become frightened when you do the morale roll, but then on their turn they will flee. Okay. Interesting. Okay, we'll read that all in more detail later. Let's keep going from where we were. Acting before the initiative number. There are 3 circumstances during which a combatant can act before his initiative number. If he begins a round with a readied combat action, he can take his readied combat action when it is triggered regardless of his own initiative number. It takes place at the end of the movement actions of the opponent that triggered his ready action, or at the last point of their movement where the opponent would disappear from view before his combat action. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, we'd have to read exactly what a readied combat action is, but okay. A readied missile weapon on first round. If at the start of the first round of combat, you're unengaged, have a missile weapon equipped, and are not surprised, you can interrupt to fire at a charging opponent on the charging opponent's initiative number, regardless of his own initiative number, as if he were readied. You lose your initiative number whether or not your attack hits. But you can cleave after the attack if it kills them. Okay, so say you go on a 4, the enemy goes on an 8 and is charging towards you with an axe, and you have a bow out. You can just take a shot as it's coming towards you. Which you probably want to do, because all you got is your bow, and that's what it's all about. Also, if you have a readied long melee weapon, and same sort of situation, you can interrupt to attack a charging opponent. The combatant cannot interrupt the charging opponent if it is of bigger size category or is also equipped with a long melee weapon. So you can't interrupt the cavalry charge, you know, with just your spearmen, I guess. In all 3 cases, a combatant who is readied loses his opportunity to act if he takes damage, fails a saving throw, or is involuntarily moved before he uses a readied action. Okay, so if you're on a 4, they're on an 8, but then someone at 9 hits you with an arrow first, then you are done. You know, you lose your full opportunity to act. But you still can go on your turn, I guess. Okay. A combatant that is facing an opponent within 5 feet engages that opponent unless either or both the combatant and the enemy are hidden from the other or are protected by particular magic that prevents engagement. Okay, so 98% of the time, if you're next to each other, you're engaged. And a combatant treats an enemy that does not engage it as if it were an ally for movement purposes. Okay. Oh, but you can be engaged with someone and they could not be engaged with you, as per this example. And you do have to be facing the opponent. So you have Aguilar, Ravila, and Skadara 5 feet away from an orc. The orc is facing Aguilar and Ravila. Aguilar is facing the orc, but Ravila has the orc to her rear. She's facing the wrong direction. Skandara is facing the orc from the orc's rear. Ravila is protected by a sanctuary spell. Therefore, Aguilar and Skandara have both engaged the orc. The orc has engaged Aguilar, but Ravila is not engaged by the orc because of her sanctuary spell. And the orc is not engaged by her because it is to her rear and because of her spell. Skandara is not engaged by the orc because she is to its rear. It's hefty. Again, I mean, I have never looked at an RPG this intricate when it comes to like combat like that. And that's because I don't tend to look at a lot of really crunchy, kind of heavy tactical TTRPGs because, you know, I don't know. Most of them aren't really super highly regarded, and I would never run them for like my family or anything. And I wouldn't run this either, like I keep saying. But this one is pretty highly regarded, so it's kind of like it's like a shock of cold water or something of, oh my god. Facing. Sometimes a combatant might engage an opponent that is not facing it. If the opponent is not already engaged and the combatant is not sneaking, the opponent can make a free facing change, turning to face the combatant that just engaged it before any attack takes place. This permits the opponent to engage the combatant, avoid being vulnerable, and possibly to take a readied action. Combatants that become engaged on their initiative must immediately halt any movement. Once engaged, combatants are restricted in the actions they can take. They cannot use a full round action to charge, run, or running sneak, cannot use a movement action to march, sneak, stand up, or take cover. They cannot use a combat action to march. Creatures in flight cannot be engaged by creatures incapable of flight. Right, okay, so that's where the thieves kind of shine, obviously. So, if you just walk up behind an orc who's just standing there, and you're not sneaking, he just gets to turn around to face you. You're not going to get a backstab. But if he's already engaged with your buddy, then you can just walk up and backstab him, because he's too busy with what's right in front of him. I think that's all pretty clear. I don't think that would really be... Yeah, I think that's relatively simple. It just sounds tough. I don't know. This is why we're going to do a sample combat with, you know, just a few, maybe a couple of them, just to kind of figure this out and see how difficult it is in practice. There's an optional rule here. While a man can physically keep another man from passing him, that same man cannot necessarily stop an elephant from moving where it wants. However, a single titan or phalanx of men might be able to prevent an elephant from passing. When such situations arise, the engagement by smaller or larger creature table can be used to decide if a combatant is engaged. Shows the number of opponents of a given size must be within 5 feet of a single creature. Blah, blah, blah. Again, this is like... These rules are optional. And we'll never get to this. Okay. Again, I feel like the text is just like... I think the text is written all this way to be very clear, but it's also just like gobs of text that just flood your brain and like, okay. But yeah, I mean, basically, this is a colossal dragon, so you'd have to have 4 man-sized creatures engage with it simultaneously to stop it. 3, and it can just stomp over them. Seems relatively clear. Man-sized creatures, you know, stopped by any other creature, even small. Large needs 2 man-sized to stop it. Huge needs 2. Gigantic 3. Okay. On a combatant's initiative segment, you can choose to delay until a lower initiative count, up to a maximum equal to the negative value of his initiative number. For instance, a character with an initiative number of 5 can delay until -5. If you don't take your initiative at that time, you lose the ability to act that round. This is pretty common rules. Oh, okay. So if you roll a 4 and you got Bloody Flux on you, you can't delay the effect of Bloody Flux, which also makes sense and is fair. You can't just wait and like, hold on, just hold it all in. Like, he's gonna dispel it, just hold on. Like, no, that shit kicks in. Alright, there you go, tie. Those combatants act sequentially. They do not take their actions simultaneously. If they're on the same side, they may choose the order they act. If they're on opposite sides, the side with fewer members can have some or all of its combatants act before or after the other side. If they have equal number of troops, then the monster side gets to go first. Or after. They get to pick. Alright, actions. On your turn, you can take 1 full round action, 2 movement actions, or 1 movement and 1 combat action. Alright, seems pretty clear. You must use your movement action before your combat action. Okay, you must move and then attack. No attack move. You cannot substitute one action for the other or use combat action before the movement action. Full round actions include casting a spell. You have to declare the spell you're casting before initiative, blah, blah, blah. You can charge. You charge an opponent in line of sight at up to running speed. The combatant must not be engaged at the start of the charge. Must be in a straight line. The path must be clear. Charging combatant is disordered, -2 penalty to AC until the start of his next initiative. After charging, he can then make a melee attack with +2 bonus on an attack. And +2 on any subsequent cleaves provided. Oh, assuming you take a 5-foot step after each cleave. Impact weapons such as spears, lances, polearms deal additional damage on a successful charge. You can actually don or remove 1 stone of armor. This action can be repeated over several rounds to don or remove suits of armor entirely. It takes 6 full round actions to don or remove ordinary plate armor. Hey, this might come up. Because, you know, you're not always in the midst of a melee when timing is kept track of with rounds. So there might be, like, enemies bashing through a door or something and you're trying to get on your armor. You would do that by rounds. So yeah, I think that's good to know. You can hastily attempt a lockpick. Again, you might be under a lot of time pressure and got a lockpick or search for something or break a trap. You can fire or reload an artillery. You can run in a straight line or gradual curve at up to running speed. Must not be engaged when you start running. You're disordered until the start of the next initiative. And then you can take cover if you're not engaged afterwards. You can also running sneak. This is a -10 penalty to the sneak throw. Yeah. No one you're making at the start of the game is going to be running sneak for a long time. Retreat. You can run away from engaging enemies at up to running speed. You must have begun the round engaged and declare the retreat before rolling initiative unless you have skirmishing. None of our characters have skirmishing. When the retreat begins, you must change your facing to the desired direction of retreat and then cannot change your facing. You can ignore engagement by any enemies that had you engaged at the start of the retreat, but when the retreat is complete, you must not remain engaged with any of the enemies that you had been engaged with. If the configuration of troops or terrain on the battlefield makes this impossible, then the combatant cannot retreat. A retreating combatant can still engage and become engaged and forced to halt by new enemies that you encounter during the process. And you're disordered until the start of your next turn. Yes. Okay, yes. So that is a declaration you make at the start. This is not like a 5-foot step sort of situation. You are declaring at the start of the whole round, like, I'm fucking running. I am retreating the hell out of there. Yeah, okay. And then you just can't end the run engaged next to, you know, anything that had you engaged. But you can always run into new enemies. You can also spike a door. That takes a full round. Movement actions. So you can take 1 or 2 of these as your turn. Actions in lieu of movement. You can grab a helpless creature within 5 feet. You can give a complex or extensive order to a creature or creatures. Simple actions such as protect me do not require an action. You can light and equip lantern, torch, or oil flask, mount or dismount a mount or vehicle, open an unlocked, unstuck door, or pull aside a curtain, pick an item off the ground and equip it, ready or loosen a shield, retrieve an item from a backpack, rucksack, or sack and equip it. Retrieving an item from an adventurer's harness, belt, pouch, bow case, quiver, or sheath does not require an action in lieu of movement. Okay. Did we find out how many things you can have just on, like, your belt? Was that made clear? You can. I know you can tie things to your belt, but I don't know. Is there a limit? I mean, mechanically, I don't know if that matters, because it's all encumbrance. But again, I think of Cataclysm. If you have in Cataclysm, you know, if you can strap a lot of shit to like your belt or whatever, you can have a big tool belt, but that really kind of fucks you up. That adds a lot of encumbrance, you know. So I don't know. I don't know. But yes, if you just have a belt pouch or a sheath or something, that's not even an action. You can just grab it. But it is an action to sheath a weapon and draw another. Dropping a weapon rather than sheathing and drawing a new one does not require an action. So, yeah, that's obviously a pretty common thing. It's just... But, you know, it's like... The archer, if he gets charged... or something, he's engaged with a guy, then he might just spend his movement to put away his bow and draw out a sword. Bada bing, bada boom. But you could drop your bow and draw out a sword, and that's not even an action. Yeah, anyways. You can march in any desired direction, add up to your combat speed, including to your flank or rear, so full orthogonal movement, I guess. Actually, you probably can move diagonally until I hear otherwise. You can change facing as many times as desired while marching and end facing in any direction. You must not be engaged at the start of the march. So, you can't just walk away from an enemy. It doesn't work like that. You can just change your facing as a movement action, however you want. You can sneak, the -5 penalty on the seeking throw, moving at half your combat speed. You can stand up if prone, but you must not be engaged. That's kind of interesting. So what if you... I mean, what do you do if you're prone next to an orc or something? Are you engaged? I don't see why you wouldn't be engaged. It makes sense. Obviously, in a realistic scenario, it's a very bad position to be in. But mechanically, I'm just curious on how you get out of that. You can take cover by falling prone, crouching, kneeling, etc. You must not be engaged. We can withdraw. Move away from engaging enemies at up to half combat speed. You can change facing as many times as you want. Can end facing in any direction. You can ignore engagement by enemies that had him engaged at the start of the withdrawal. Then at the end, you must not remain engaged with any of those. You can engage new enemies, blah, blah, blah. So this is basically retreat, but this is the walking version instead of running. So you still have to declare that at the start of the round. Then combat actions. Obviously, attack is the big one. If you remain stationary and are not engaged, you may move up to 5 feet towards an enemy when you attack, if necessary to engage them. And this includes special maneuvers, cleaves, etc. So yes, cleaving, you do get to move 5 feet. The enemy does not necessarily have to be next to you in order to cleave. So with the 5 feet move after every cleave, and eventually you can cleave like 8 times in a round, you can really cut through basic bitch enemies. You can cut through a platoon, you know? Theoretically. There are actions you can take instead of attacking that are a bit more complex than movement, such as applying a healing herb, oil, or salve to yourself, or something else. You can brandish a holy symbol, garlic, or mirror, cast a spell from a rod, staff, wand, or ring, cleanse yourself of acid or oil by pouring out a water skin of water, drink a potion or pour a potion down a helpless combatant's throat, mount or dismount, stationary mount or vehicle. This is if you're not proficient, I guess. Unlock a door using a key. Use an equipped item for non-combat purposes. or some other moderately complex action. You can also bash down a stuck door, lift a portcullis, smash a window, blah, blah, blah. Might require dungeon bashing. Defend. Defend yourself or an adjacent character to his rear or offhand flank. If you don't have a shield, you defend with a +2 against melee. If you do have a shield, he or the target he defends against gains a +4 AC against missile weapons, other than thrown weapons, and a +2 against melee and thrown, and a +2 on blast saving throws. Combatant must not have charged, run, or retreated. Can't benefit from being defended by 2 characters, both from the same facing, but can benefit by being defended to both his front and flank/rear. Lasts until the start of the combatant's next initiative. Okay. So basically, as your turn, though, you could, if you have a shield, you can just put up your shield as an action and get +4 AC against missile weapons. But yeah, you can also cover the very squishy mage who's trying to cast a cool spell. But this is, you know, it's an action on your turn, so your initiative has to be pretty solid. Yeah, okay. And this is part of why movement is always before these combat actions, because you can't defend somebody and then move away from them and blah blah blah. You can attempt to end a grabbed, restrained, or wrestled condition. I love that those are 3 separate conditions. You can start hiding. You can listen for faint sounds. You can march at up to combat speed. You can ready a combat or movement action. Get ready to take an action at a later point. You must state the intended action and trigger for taking it. You lose this readied action if you take damage, fail a saving throw, or are involuntarily moved. You can rebuke undead in line of sight. Stand up if prone. Ah, there you go. Okay, so it's a movement action to stand up if you are not engaged. But if you are engaged, that is your turn. That is your whole turn. Now we know. You can take cover by falling prone, crouching, kneeling, etc. And this is even if you're engaged. You can treat an injury of an unconscious ally, triggering a roll on the mortal wounds table. Can't wait to look at that. You can also apply a healing herb on the ally. Oh no, this is part of the treating the injury. Apply a healing herb, pour a potion down their throat, use a curative magic item, or use lay of hands as part of a... Alright, so you can do it without any of that stuff, I guess. Or use a spell-like ability. Readied actions. Countercharge. A readied attack may, but does not have to be considered a countercharge if the opponent whose action is interrupting took a charge movement action. Okay, so you... Right, so if you have a bow or a spear, you can automatically interrupt the charge before your initiative. But what this is just a general counter charge using sort of any weapon. And I think that is... Okay, yeah, right. So you just have your sword and board or whatever, you know, or a mace or something. You wanna, you're standing there, you know the guy's gonna charge at you, so you ready the counter charge. You get a +2 bonus on your attack throw. You deal impact damage if you're eligible to do so from your weapon, but you do become disordered, -2 penalty to AC until the start of your next initiative segment. There's also readied attack against charge. But this is if you're equipped with a polearm sphere or other weapon capable of dealing impact damage. You are set for the charge. You don't get the +2 to hit, but you also don't become disordered. But why would you bother... Well, hold on. Oh, okay, yes. Right. Because these things where you act before the initiative number, that's only on the first round. So if you're trying to intercept or, you know, take a charge, counter a charge after the first round, you have to use a readied action. Okay. Good to remember, sort of. If at the end of a combat round you still have a readied action, you retain it and can use it on the subsequent round. But once your initiative number comes up again, you stop being ready. You can still act normally. If an entire combat round passes with no offensive actions made by either side against their opponents, all combatants lose any readied actions. This is why combatants can never begin combat ready. So it's just like, yeah, you have two sides of soldiers, and they're both like, yes, we ready our action to counter the charge. And then no one charges. Yeah, so then it just ends. No ready. Okay, conducting an attack. By default, combatants receive one attack from any given combat action or charge action. Through magic such as Swift Sword, some might gain an additional attack. Some monsters have attack sequences, the most common of which is the Claw, Claw, Bite sequence, which permits 3 attacks on 1 combat actions. Combatants who kill or incapacitate an opponent with an attack can cleave. So, yeah, obviously, it's kind of a common thing in D&D and stuff, for fighters especially, to get multiple attacks per round. They level up and they start being able to roll 2 attacks, 3 attacks, 4 attacks per round, just every round. And that's sort of there to somewhat offset the difference between fighters, martials, and spellcasters at higher levels. But I've seen multiple games now throwing that concept away and being very kind of like Shadow Dark, I know for sure, is very specific about never giving characters more than 1 action per turn. Like, in the grand majority of cases. Here, also fighters don't get multiple attacks, but they do get cleave. The thing is, with cleave, you have to kill a target, and then you have to keep killing targets. I think it's a decent compromise, because it still makes you feel like a badass when you're cutting through, you know, little weenies. But it's also not like, okay, here's a big dragon, I'm gonna roll 4 times to attack it, and blah, blah, blah. That can really get things bogged down a lot. Alright, so attack throw. Roll a d20. You apply any modifiers from high strength or dex, magical or special circumstances. The result is compared to the target values listed on the attack throw table for the combatant's class and level or HD. Because well-armored or highly dexterous targets are harder to hit, the target's armor class is added to the target value necessary to hit it. If it hits, yeah, if it hits, then you roll damage, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Alright. So Marcus is a 10th level fighter with an attack throw of 4+. To hit an unarmored target, AC 0, he only needs to roll a 4 or higher. To hit a plate armored target, AC 6, he needs to roll a 10 or higher. If he rolled a 3 or less, his attack would be a clean miss. If he rolled 4 to 9, his attack would still count as a miss, but in the game world, he'd have clanged his blade on the plate. Yeah, okay. A 20 hit dice bronze golem has an attack throw of -9. Jesus. Attacks an ogre AC 3. To hit the ogre, it needs to roll a -9 plus 3, -6 or higher. So basically, he can only miss on a 1. Because that's always a miss regardless. The golem is so powerful that the ogre's armor is irrelevant to it. Yeah, no shit. A combatant's position relative to his target can affect his attack throw. If he is attacking a target at a lower elevation... oh, Jesus. If he is attacking a target at a lower elevation, the target is subjacent. I have never seen that term in a rulebook. Granting a +1 bonus to attack the target. If he's attacking target from his space on either flank, target is flanked, +2 bonus to attack the target. Attacking from the rear, target is vulnerable, +2 bonus to attacking, and to make an ambush or backstab if eligible. Bonus from attacking a sub-Jason character, can stack with flanked or vulnerable. So, yes, shooting down a bow from up top at the back of an enemy is a +3 and ambush, probably, depending on your class. So, might be like a +5, really, with an extra damage dice. Alright, so here you have all the attack throw charts. So, monster hit dice of 1 are same as basically everybody on a 10+. Everyone starts at a 10+, whether you're a fighter or a mage. Then it doesn't get worse than that for characters. But then fighters progress much more rapidly through it, and at level 14 they're on a 1+. Alright, yeah, so normally you have to be within 5 feet of a target and face him, but combatants equipped with long weapons who are positioned behind and facing an ally can attack targets within 5 feet of that ally. That's very interesting. Because then, that doesn't mean that with a spear you can just attack from 10 feet away. That is not what it's saying. You have to be behind an ally who is engaged with the target. Well, I don't know if you have to be engaged. It doesn't say, or the ally has to be engaged. You just have to be positioned behind an ally and facing them, and then you can attack targets within 5 feet of that ally. Okay, interesting. I don't know how much that's ever going to come up in small scale gameplay. We don't have anyone with a long weapon, so it really doesn't matter. But yeah, blah blah blah. Attack throws, damage rolls. Blah, 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 blah. Fighting style can sometimes affect your melee attack throw. Combatants fighting the dual weapon style gain +1 bonus to melee attack throw from having the second weapon. If you have specialization dual weapon, you get another +1 bonus. Blah blah blah. Okay, so it's mostly just dual weapons. Instead of making a standard melee attack, combatants can attempt to disarm, knock down, wrestle, or otherwise disrupt their opponent in some way. See special maneuvers below. Missile attacks. You must be in range. And we have ranges listed for all our weapons. So for our short bow here, for Barizon, short range is 75 feet. If you go past that to medium range, that's a -2. Past that to long range is a -5. And it can't go past that unless you're part of a large formation. Line of sight is not blocked by intervening combatants. Cover can make it harder to hit, though. Targets in cover get a -2 penalty if it's waist high, -4 if it's chest high or very narrow. Missile attacks through intervening engaged allies to strike at unengaged enemies suffer a -4 penalty. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Pathfinder is the same way. That's why everyone takes precise shot or whatever it is. Missile attacks at enemy targets engaged with allied targets are not permitted at all due to the risk of friendly fire. Wait a minute. Oh. Okay, so unless you have precise shooting, you cannot fire into melee. You cannot fire at an enemy target that's engaged with an allied target. So that first part, the -4, is shooting through engaged allies to strike at an unengaged enemy. So if you have precise shooting, then you can shoot at engaged targets with a -4, and in unengaged targets through a melee at no penalty. They also ignore up to 4 points of cover. Damn, okay, so we need to get that shit for our archer. That's a pretty big factor. Missile attacks are never allowed against an enemy engaging the firer, so you can never fire point blank. I think that's fair, honestly. I mean, a lot of games... I mean, most games apply a penalty to shooting in melee like that, right next to you. But like Shadow the Weird Wizard, it just applies 1 Bane, and it's like not that big of a factor. When really it probably realistically should be pretty impossible. Unless you're fucking Legolas or something. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, missile attacks versus troop formations. I think we can mostly skip over that for now. Missile attacks with burning oil, holy water, and torches. Yeah, I mean, this might come up at some point, but I feel like I would just read through this at that point. Throwing torches does come up fairly often, though, early on. On a direct hit, a thrown torch deals 1d4 fire damage to the target. On a splash, it deals 1 damage to the target, then falls to the ground. On a miss, it scatters and does not deal damage. If you roll a 1, it scatters and is extinguished. Throwing torches is not a very effective combat tactic, but can be very useful for adventurers who want to illuminate an area up ahead without advancing into it. So you don't get a bonus to damage from high strength, class, backstabbing, or any similar effect. Okay. Okay. So when you throw burning oil, holy water, or torches, you roll the throw. And if it beats the target with their AC, then it's a direct hit. If it is a successful throw based on your attack, but it's not high enough to beat their AC, then it's a splash. Yeah, okay. Missile attacks with artillery. Yep. I mean, gonna need to know that at some point if you're doing sieges and large-scale stuff. Okay, damage. Deal damage based on the type of weapon as well as fighting style. Whips deal 1d2 damage. That's not a lot. Unarmed strikes deal 1d3 non-lethal damage. Okay. Tiny melee weapons such as daggers, hatchets, club, 1d4, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I mean, we get all this. Can be modified by attacker's strength, magic bonuses, class powers, proficiencies, conditions. Damage type. Every spell, effect, or weapon deals damage to 1 or more damage types. There are 12 damage types in Axe, split into physical and energy damage. Physical are acidic, arcane, bludgeoning, piercing, poisoning, slashing. Energy are cold, electric, fire, luminous, necrotic, seismic. If not otherwise, tag damage is considered mundane, but some is extraordinary. Some combatants are immune or resistant to particular damage types. If you're immune, automatically succeed in all saving throws against blah blah blah. Ignore damage of that type, blah blah blah. If you're resistant, you suffer half damage and get a +2 to any saving throws against it. Okay. When a combatant's hit points drops to 0 or fewer, the combatant is usually unconscious and possibly dead. Combatant's condition remains uncertain until an ally either casts a cure spell on it or otherwise treats its wounds, or until necromantic magic is used on it. Then, the unconscious combatant must roll 1d20 and 1d6 on the mortal wounds table for the type of damage that felled it. Combatants not treated within 24 hours of being unconscious must roll with no bonus for treatment and at the full -10 penalty for being treated 1 day later. Sounds bad. Sounds unlikely to live. Okay, so these are the modifiers to your D20 roll. Your con mod. If you're wearing a heavy helm, that's +2. Helm saves lives. You get a bonus if you are a higher hit dice. So our fighter actually gets +4 on the roll because of his D8. Your hit points, so the exact value or so of your hit point total. +5 if you're at exactly 0. And then it gets worse, so there's big penalties past that. -20 if your HP are at negative value greater than double your max. Yeah, that would be pretty bad, so don't jump off a cliff. You get a bonus from healing magic or laying on hands. Bonus from healing proficiency. +2 if horsetail is applied. You get a penalty per spell level if triggered by necromantic magic. And then the timing of when you're treated. +2 if it's within 1 round. -3 if it's within 1 turn. 10 minutes or so. -5 if within 1 hour. -8 if within 1 day. -10 if after. Okay. Magic used to gain a bonus to the mortal wounds roll does not heal damage. If the mortal wounds roll is at least a 16, the combatant will awaken with 1 HP. If it's 15 or less, they remain at their current HP and begin dying. Constructs, incarnations, and undead are immediately destroyed at 0. Plants and oozes are immediately slain at 0. Cannot have their wounds treated. If you suffer a permanent wound, the effects are permanent, obviously, until the wound is healed. Repair, disfigurement, disability, restore life and limb, troll blood, and similar magic can heal 1 or more permanent wounds. If a combatant is killed, he can be revived with restore life and limb or other magical effect that restores the dead to life. It is a fantasy game, after all. However, combatants treated with such magic often need extensive periods of time to recover and might suffer strange side effects. You roll 1d20 and 1d6 on the Tampering with Mortality table for your alignment. This is modified by your age, the power of the spell cast, the spell, +2 if it's cast in the temple of your spellcaster's god. Then there's a penalty based on the state of your body. So if you were killed instantly, it's a -10. -1 per each hand, foot, ear, eye, tongue, genitalia destroyed. Great. And then it's also based on your will modifier. How many days it's been since you died. +5 if the creature is still alive. Because you can tamper with mortality. Oh, right. You roll on this to restore limbs as well, right? Combatant is considered to be instantly killed if it died from disease or poison, was slain while helpless, or rolled an instantly killed result on the mortal wounds table. Mortal wounds and tampering can be found in Appendix C. I want to look at these right now. This is exciting shit. We just gotta wait for this whole thing to load. Okay, so it goes over all those modifiers here, blah, blah, blah. Great. Here. Okay, so if your mortal wounds are from acid, electrical, fire, or luminous, You roll the d20, and then it's an unmodified d6. So obviously the rolling a 6 or less. Or, I mean, really even 0 or less is just, you're instantly killed. And it's all pretty horrific stuff. 1 to 5, you're mortally wounded. You die unless healed to 1 HP within 1 round. And then you'll need 1 month of bed rest. And the effect afterwards is not great. Both your arms are burned off. Both legs are burned off. Your eyes, ears, nose, and lips sloughed off under the terrible heat. All your limbs are burned off. Your lungs are scorched. Your face hideously scarred. I mean, this character is not involved in the game anymore. Pretty bad. Even if you get a 6 to 10 on the roll, you know, pretty nasty. One of your eyes melted. 1 arm is burned off. 1 leg is burned off. Both of your ears and most of your face. 1 leg and 1 arm burned off. I mean, it's still pretty, probably, it's retirement stuff. 11 to 15. You could still lose a hand or foot at that point. You could lose your genitals, leaving just blackened lumps. Or your scorched lungs must rest for 2 turns every 6. Your expedition speed reduced by 1/3. Cannot force march. Con reduced by 1/3. Jesus. Okay, so then you get up to 16 to 20. It's got to be somewhat okay, right? There, at least you automatically recover with 1 HP. But you do need, like, a week of rest. You lose a finger, maybe multiple fingers or toes or an ear. There might be gruesome scarring, but, you know, you're mostly still capable. 21 to 25, pretty minor for the most part. You might take a -1 to all initiative rolls. And then 26 plus, like, you're pretty good. Pretty much fine. Okay. So there's then mortal wounds from arcane, bludgeoning, and seismic. Mortal wounds just from cold. Mortal wounds just from necrotic. No, mortal wounds from piercing. And mortal wounds from poisonous. And then mortal wounds from savage. Slashing. Yeah. So savage is like animal attacks and stuff like that. Okay, so lots of fun stuff. I mean, I always love shit like this because it's very gruesome and you get to describe it in very gruesome ways. Okay, so going back to that then. To recap, normally in old school OSR kind of games, once you hit 0, you are dead. Please make a new character. Actually, you should already have a character ready to go. You know, that's it. There's no real ifs, ands, or buts. Yeah, there is stuff that revives characters. That does exist, but you're dead. I mean, there's no like, oh, I'm bleeding out. Oh, no, like, you're dead. That's what 0 is. Here, it's a bit nicer. Because you're down, you're unconscious, possibly going to be dead. But hopefully someone can get to you quickly and heal you for pretty quickly. Because if you get healed, like, the same round by, like, lay on hands or something, like, you're a fighter. I'm sure this whole example goes into it. So here's a fighter. He's got 36 hit points, 18 con. That's pretty great. He's reduced to -12 by a fireball. His ally casts Cure Serious Injury on him the next round. So he rolls on the Mortal Wounds fire table. He gets a -2 because his hit points are at a negative value greater than 1/4 his max. He gets +4 because of his D8 hit dice, +4 from Cure Serious Injury, +2 because he's treated within 1 round, and +3 from his con for a total of +11. Unfortunately, he rolls a 6, which becomes a 17, so he's at shock. He's at 1 HP, but he needs magical healing and a night's bed rest to recover. His D6 roll was a 2, so his ears burned off, and he suffers a permanent -1 penalty to surprise rolls and listening throws. He doesn't get any HP from the Cure Serious Injury. But instead, his ally could have used Cure Serious Injury after the roll. So he could have just treated him, which would have been a +7 modifier, and it would have been a 13 instead of a 17. In this case, he would have been critically wounded at -12 HP, and they would have had 1 day to get him to 1 HP before he died, and his permanent wound would have been much worse. He would have had his manhood burned off. It's almost always better to use the healing spell on a mortal wounds roll when available. Okay. So it's nicer than just dying at 0. There is a chance that you'll be okay and recover, but no one is really going down and walking away unscathed. There's still a pretty hefty penalty from going to 0, and you're probably, I mean, there's a decent chance that you're just going to be like dead or wish you were dead anyways and make a new character. Okay, healing. You recover hit points through rest. For each full day dedicated to rest in reasonably sanitary conditions, you recover 1d3 HP. That is a full day dedicated to rest in reasonably sanitary conditions. Yikes. So that is not overnight or anything. That is a full day. To get 1d3 back. Yeesh, 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 yeesh. It's pretty slow going. But I think that's mostly par for the course for these kind of games because it's relatively realistic. Relatively, you know. In reality, you know, it would take weeks and weeks to heal. But this is still a fantasy game, so whatever. But yeah, pretty slow. Non-lethal damage, blah, blah, blah. Can't reduce a creature's HP below 0. You go unconscious, you must roll on the mortal wounds table as usual, but the likelihood of death is less. You add the amount of non-lethal damage combatant suffered to his max HP for purposes of calculating the ratio of current HP to max HP on the mortal wounds modifier table. So yes, if you want to knock somebody out, you can, you know, knock them unconscious with non-lethal damage. They still might die. It's really less lethal than non-lethal. Cleaving. Yeah, we've kind of already gone over this. Not much else needs to be said about cleaves. I think it's a cool concept. Blah, blah, blah. Cleaving in melee, you do get a 5-foot step after killing a target to potentially cleave another. Even if you're engaged by another target or targets, but you must remain engaged by them at the end of the 5-foot step. Unless you're moving after a successful overrun against them. If, after completing a melee attack, fell the target, and you have no targets remaining within 5 feet that you can engage, and you have cleaves remaining, you can expend a cleave to hurl a thrown weapon. And if you kill a target with that and have more cleaves, you can throw other weapons. Alternatively, you can expend a cleave to revert to the defend action or to ready a combat action. That's pretty big. I think that line is really important to keep in mind for a lot of fighters. That instead of trying to kill something else, maybe you just defend or something. Or ready an action to wait for something to come to you. So you could charge which would give you a -2 penalty to AC, and then instead of cleaving afterwards, just defend to remove it. Okay. You can also cleave with missile weapons. And after each kill, you can move 5 feet away from visible enemies. So you just constantly are kiting backwards and just firing arrows. But it is limited to 2 with an arbalest or crossbow and 3 plus your strength bonus with a longbow and composite bow. You can take any number of cleaves using short bows, slings, sling staffs, thrown bolas, darts, daggers, hand axes, javelin spears, or warhammers. Subject to your limit. And available ammunition. They must be in the same range category as the original target, but they do not need to be within 5 feet of each other. It's pretty sweet. You can also, if you have no viable targets, you can expend a cleave to ready or to drop prone, hide, or move 5 feet into cover. But that's only if you have no viable targets that are unengaged by allies. Okay. Okay. Interesting. I don't think cleaves normally have this, like, unengaged limiter on it. At least I don't see that anywhere. Yeah, I don't see that anywhere, but it just says after completing a missing attack that it fell the target, if you have no targets in range that are unengaged by allies, and you have cleaves remaining, you can ready, drop prone, hide, move 5 feet into cover. And then mass combat cleaves, blah, blah, blah. Saving throws. Pretty much as expected. Combatants in cover gain bonus to blast saving throws caused by artillery, burning oil, or similar effects. If the cover is waist high, +2, chest high, or very narrow, +4. On a successful saving throw, creatures protected by arrow slits take no damage, even if the effect would normally deal half. Size adjusted. -2 penalty. If, okay, so if you're smaller, yeah, okay. So a stone giant forcing back a human fighter. Since the human is 2 sizes smaller, he has to roll at -4. And if the fighter were forcing back the giant would save at +4. And here we have all the saving throws per class, blah, blah, blah. Casting spells, here we go. So you have to inform before initiative dice are rolled. If you take damage or fail a saving throw before you act, spell is interrupted and lost. And it still counts against your number per day. And you cannot do any other action on that round because you forfeited the whole thing. You must have line of sight on the targets or areas spell is cast on, blah, blah, blah. Some spells impose other unique conditions. Some spells require a caster maintain concentration. See conditions for rules on concentration. Blah, blah, blah. Then there's special maneuvers, of course. Not every action in combat will be a sword swing, arrow shot, or fireball. Rules below explain how to handle everything from a punch with a plate mail gauntlet to a giant tossing a dwarf. Combatants cannot cleave after special maneuvers unless the maneuver itself incapacitates the target or states that it permits cleaves. Combatants with multiple attacks, such as Claw, Claw, Bite, or multiple tentacles, can use any or all attacks from their routine to perform special maneuvers. A giant octopus with 8 tentacles might force back an opponent with 1, wrestle an opponent with another, and attack normally with the remaining 6. Whew. Brawling. This is striking without a weapon. Normal characters do 1d 3 points of non-lethal, or 1d4 with a kick, but that's at -2 on the attack throw. Standard strength adjustments apply. Character in light, very light, or no armor cannot successfully punch or kick a character in medium or heavy armor. If this is attempted, the damage is applied to the attacker instead of defender. Okay, it's pretty simple. It's not a whole lot to that. Clamber. You can attempt to clamber on top of a creature that is one or more size categories larger than you. So it's a melee attack throw with a -4 penalty. If you're proficient in climbing, that penalty is waived if you make a successful proficiency throw first. If the attempt succeeds, the creature then makes a size-adjusted paralysis saving throw, but the size adjustment is reversed, so it is easier to climb on really big stuff. If the creature succeeds, it shrugs off the combatant's attempt. If it fails, the combatant is now clambering on the creature. Might be mounted on its back or perched on its shoulder, etc. Clambering combatant gains +2 attack bonus against the creature he's clambered onto, and the creature is vulnerable to the clambering combatant. Whoa. So you get like a +4 just out the gate? And like a backstabber get +6? And more damage? It's crazy good. Clambering combatant also gains a measure of protection against the creature's own attacks. If the creature lacks arms, tails, or other appendages capable of reaching its own back, it cannot directly attack the clambering combatant. Even if it does, it rolls with a -4 penalty to attack throws. As an action, they can attempt to unseat the clambering combatant by bucking, rearing, colliding with walls, and similar tactics. Forces every combatant on it to make a paralysis saving throw. If you fail, you slip off the creature, possibly suffering 1d6 per 10 feet fallen. Alright. Well, that's all pretty fun and simple, I think. Not too complicated. Coup de grace. Against a helpless opponent of the same or smaller size category. Provided the combatant is not engaged and his attack is capable of damaging the helpless creature, the helpless creature is then automatically slain without a roll. Cannot cleave afterwards. You can attempt to disarm an opponent. Melee attack throw, the -4 penalty. The opponent suffers damage and then must make a paralysis saving throw. +4 bonus if they're wielding it two-handed. And if they fail, the weapon or item is knocked 5 feet away. Alright, I mean, I could see that coming up from time to time. It's kind of handy. Especially since most, like, brawling is pretty... I mean, most people would rather get punched than stabbed with a spear, so... And the fact that disarm still does damage. That's pretty nice. I mean, the -4 penalty is pretty shitty, but still. And it seems like you could do this from, like, the rear. So you could, like... You know, they're vulnerable to you and you still can disarm them from behind. Like, I think that's pretty cool. Force back. So, you know, a shove or some kind of effect like that. It's a melee attack throw. -4 penalty. They suffer damage. Make a size-adjusted paralysis saving throw. If they fail, they are forced back a number of feet equal to the damage dealt. Wow. If they are pushed into a wall or obstacle, they're knocked down, taking 1d6 damage per 10 feet he has traveled. Pushed into another character or monster, he's knocked prone. If the character or monster he's pushed into is as large or larger than him. If the character or monster is pushed into is smaller, the smaller one is then knocked prone. And the opponent continues to be forced back. Okay, so again, like, you deal... It's a -4 penalty, but you deal damage. And then you could push them back like 8 feet. Which on a grid is not super much, you know? It's like a square or two. You'd have to hit them very hard, I think, to get, like, collision damage here. 1d6 per 10 feet traveled. So you have to do at least 10 damage to force them into a wall. But that's 10 feet you've traveled, not like your potential travel. So if you're next to a wall, you're not doing anything. They have to really send you flying. But, you know, knocking them off a cliff, that's a whole other ball of worms. Incapacitate. If you want to attack with the flat of your blade or something to knock them out. It's a -4 penalty on the attack throw, and the attack will then deal non-lethal damage. So you don't have to punch. You can just hit them with the broadside of your weapon. But it is a -4 penalty. So depending on how much health they have, brawling might be just easier to knock them out. You can trip, sweep, or otherwise knock your opponent down. Again, melee attack throw with -4 penalty. Then a paralysis saving throw, size adjusted. And failing is knocked prone. Which, as we know, is pretty bad. Because prone here is vulnerable. And you have to spend your turn to stand back up. So it's pretty big to knock a dude down and just beat the shit out of him. Overrun. Attempt to overrun an opponent's position without stopping to fight him. Melee attack throw, -4 penalty. We're sensing a pattern here. Then the opponent must make paralysis saving throw. They succeed. They block the combatant. Meaning they just take damage as normal. If they fail the saving throw or choose not to block, combatant gains a bonus movement action and bonus combat action. The bonus movement can only be used to move straight ahead through the opponent by up to their combat speed. And the bonus combat action can only be used to make an attack, including another overrun. Oh, so, damn. That's pretty big. That is really important for a DM to keep in mind, because if you've got an archer in the back or a mage in the back, and there's a fighter trying to box you out, you know, the creature can just try and overrun them. And then if they succeed, they just move right past them. And then you still get to keep moving and move up to, like, the mage and smack him in the mouth. So that seems pretty wild. Sunder, you can try to break opponent's weapon or shield. -4 penalty to sunder stabs, spears, polearms. -6 sunder anything else. Suffers damage and then must make paralysis saving throw. Dagger, swords, shields gain +4 on the save. Staffs, spears, polearms suffer -4 penalty because they're just made out of wood. If you fail a saving throw, your shit is broken. Okay. Sweep attack. You attack multiple targets at once. You have to designate 2 or more targets engaged by you, and then make an attack throw against each target. Each target that he successfully attacks then suffers damage equal to the ordinary damage of his attack divided by the total number of targets. Including those you missed, rounded down. Okay, so here you can attack just multiple targets at the same time, but you're dividing your damage. So depending on, yeah, like the example here is a lesser titan equipped with a mace, dealing 66 damage. He's engaged with 4 orcs, so he sweeps against all 4. He attacks each one separately, hitting 3 of them. Each of the 3 hits suffers damage equal to 1/4 his ordinary damage. So he rolls 66 and he gets 20. Each of the 3 orcs suffers 5 damage. Because even though he missed the 4th one, you include that in the division. This is enough to incapacitate the orcs. Since he killed more than half of his 4 targets, the Titan can cleave. And he uses it to smash the remaining orc, hitting it for 66. Okay. I think probably for the average fighter, in most situations, you're probably going to be relying on cleaves instead. But, yeah. And then wrestling. Melee with -4 penalty. Ignore target's AC from armor, but not AC from dex, magic bonus, natural armor, spells. Then a paralysis saving throw, size adjusted, and if you fail, you've been wrestled. Interesting. I guess that's the grab, right? There was no other grab. So it's wrestled. So now we have all the conditions. Blah, blah, blah. We have morale. We have escape rules. So you make a morale roll at the end of each round for a group when 1/3 of the group has been killed or otherwise incapacitated. And this is a 2d6 roll. Make a morale roll for a solitary creature when it loses 1/3 of its hit points, and each round thereafter the creature is damaged. It also makes a morale roll for the creature at the end of the first round if the adventurers all flee from it. Yeah, it's because they might pursue, and you gotta roll for that as well. So, depending on how much health it's lost, how much the group has been lost, how much the group is outnumbered, or whatever. If the creature or group cannot retreat and the enemy is not accepting their surrender, that's a big bonus because they're just like, well, fuck it then. We have no choice. So then this 2d6 chart. Frightened retreat. They become frightened until no longer pursued or until 1d10 rounds pass. Cowering creatures are vulnerable, cannot attack, cast spells, blah, blah, blah. They will surrender if terms are offered. Morale faltering. Suffer a -2 penalty to make attack throws, proficiency throws, saving throws versus the enemy. If they're no longer engaged by any enemies, then they stop being faltered. They'll usually attempt a fighting withdrawal to end the condition. They might surrender if offered fair and reasonable terms, such as safe passage with their arms, etc. Fight on means that the monsters will continue the battle without retreating, but they will not pursue if their opponents flee. Advance and pursue means the monsters will continue the battle without retreating, going on the offensive where possible. Victory or death means the monsters will fight on without retreating or needing to roll morale for the remainder of the battle. If the adventurers attempt to surrender to their enemies, it is up to the judge to decide whether the enemies even listen, and under what terms they will accept surrender. Perils of cowardice. Anytime a frightened or faltering combatant moves through a doorway, makes a hard turn around a corner, traverses an obstacle at running speed, must make a paralysis saving throw. They failed, they fall at that point, move no further that round. Get into mounted combat. That's a whole thing. Vehicular combat. Oh boy. XP. You get 1 XP per 1 gold piece value of treasure recovered on adventures. This includes all coins, gems, jewels, and merchandise, and other valuables worth at least 1 SP per stone, about the price of wheat. So a big bundle of wheat is big XP. Something like that. Magical treasure. They receive XP equal to the apparent value of the item. What it would be worth if it were non-magical. Really? If the party identifies a magic item and sells it without using it, they receive an additional 1 XP per 1 gold piece earned in the sale. If the characters use the items, they do not get any additional XP even if later sold. Jeez. Judge is the final arbiter of what counts as treasure. Some players have been known to pursue treasure XP to somewhat absurd degrees, carrying off building bricks, collecting seashells, or gathering firewood as treasure. Limiting treasure XP to objects worth at least 1 SP per stone excludes such items from counting. The intent is to encourage the players to focus on real treasure and not act like stars of a pawn shop reality TV show. Limiting treasure XP from sale of magic items to unused items prevents characters from using such items to help them adventure, then selling the magic items for XP later, benefiting twice. That all makes sense to me. That seems pretty sensible. And I can see that, you know, there are things throughout this game that have been course corrections compared to old school RPGs. If the party receives reward or treasure for accomplishing a task or an adventure, or captures a prisoner that can be ransomed or sold, party gains treasure XP equal to the value of the reward, ransom, or sale price once it received. Yes, dude. Fucking ransoming important figures for money, and then you get XP out of it as well. It's brilliant. If you earn income from wages or business transactions, you do not earn treasure XP, but you can get campaign XP from arbitrage trading of merchandise found in adventures, even if the merchandise does not itself provide adventuring XP. So yeah, you can still do the building bricks selling and stuff, but that becomes arbitrage trading, depending on where you sell it. All defeated monsters, either outsmarted, captured, or killed, grant XP based on how powerful they are. Begin with a base XP determined by their hit dice, and receive bonus for each special ability asterisk they have. Count the number of asterisks next to a hits dice in the monster listing in the monster's manual. Okay. So a hit dice monster of 1 is worth 10 XP base. For any bonus XP it has, that's 3 per, or bonus ability, special ability it has, it's 3 per. So Lamia is an HD 9 creature with 3 special abilities, so her bonus XP is 1800. A group of adventurers receive 2500 XP for each Lamia they defeat. Okay. I mean, a hit dice 1 monster is not likely to have too many special abilities. But there you go. I mean, that's one. So the standard little 1 hit dice, like, you know, a bandit or something with 1 hit dice. Like us. That's 10 XP. And to level up to 2, we need like 2000 XP. So that's 200 of these dudes. It's not really where the majority of your XP is going to come from. It's just like a nice little bonus. Totals for each monster defeated are calculated and added to the value of all XP from treasure, and the sum for all XP is divided evenly among all party members who return to civilization alive or dead, with henchmen receiving a half share. So a group consisting of Ilaria, Norden, Avaro, and Drakima, 2 PCs, and 2 henchmen kill a 5 hit dice monster worth 200 XP, find a gold statue worth 500 gold pieces, and a gem worth 200 gold pieces. 200 XP from monsters, 700 from gold pieces, add up to 900. And then that's allocated across 1 plus 1 plus half equals 3 shares. Ilaria and Norden get 900 XP divided by 3. Times 1, so they each get 300 each. And then the henchmen both get 150 each. Because yes, henchmen go on adventures, they get a half share of XP and treasure, and they can level up. XP is divided only among party members who return to civilization. Deceased do not get anything. Deceased party members who are brought back to civilization do not receive a share. But if they receive XP and are not restored to life within a day... Oh, if they're brought back to civilization, they do receive a share of XP. But if they're not restored to life within a day, it's applied to their reserve. And then this is multiplied by your XP bonus, depending on your key attribute. Now, I have heard a much easier way to do it is just look at how much XP you need for your next level, and then just reduce that number by 5% or 10%, rather than having to calculate, you know, all these funny business of like, okay, I get 1200 and we're going to take 10% of that, and okay, I actually get 1320. It's like, just lower the number you need to hit by 10%. So like 2,000 becomes 1,800. I mean, I believe the math works out the same in that case, right? I'm pretty sure. That's what I was told. Character advancement, character death, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so backup or new character starts at first level with 0 XP unless you have established a reserve XP fund, or the party throws the deceased character a heroic funeral. Reserve XP fund is a fund of XP established by a player. It serves as an XP floor for all their future characters. Number of XP in the reserve is equal to 90% of the gold piece value of money allocated to the reserve. Money is allocated to the reserve by spending it to no other tangible gain benefit whatsoever. This could include anonymous tithes to churches, reckless spending on wine, women, and song, elaborate funeral pyres for deceased henchmen, and so on. And then you start a new character with that number. So, Mangging, a 5th level fighter, returns from a successful adventure laden with gold. In a reckless orgy, he spends 3,400 gold pieces carousing through the city of Aura. As this is spent to no real in-game benefit, he's set aside a reserve XP fund of 3,060 XP, which is 90% of that. On the next adventure, he's tragically slain, so his new character starts with 3,060 XP. The XP reserve fund does not get depleted by use. At no point can a new character ever enter play with more XP than the prior character. XP reserve fund belongs to the player, not the character. It cannot be transferred between players. Okay. So, awesome, right? Here we have fucking rules that do include, like, the classic, you start a new character at levels 1, 0 XP. But then, like, as the campaign goes on, there is a way for you to not start at level 1 with 0 XP. You have to essentially just throw away massive amounts of gold, but there you go. I mean, there's your gold sink. If you needed more gold sinks. I think it's very nice. If I was going to play, like, an old school kind of game like this, I'd be pretty bummed about starting at level 1 with 0, and that still very much could happen and will happen most likely, in like the second session or something like that. But yeah, now it's like a prudent thing of like, hey, you got to build up that reserve fund just in case. Because starting with 3,000 XP, I mean, you're already starting at level 2. That's pretty nice. I mean, yeah, it's not cheap. It's not cheap, and you're throwing away benefits potentially for your current character as like insurance on future characters with the assumption that you're going to die. But yeah, I like it. Heroic funerals. If an adventurer dies heroically, his party members can honor him. His new character can then enter the game with additional XP points equal to 90% of the gold piece value of money spent on the funeral, and or interred with his character on top of whatever's in the reserve fund. But you can't enter play with more XP than the prior character. Adventurers who die unheroically due to own cowardice, greed, or stupidity, or slain while cowering, frightened, faltering, and retreating cannot benefit from a heroic funeral. Alright, but assuming you die heroically, then other people can pool funds that they have. Like, come on, guys. I don't want to start... I know I neglected my reserve fund, but come on. I don't want to start at 0 XP. Give me a good heroic funeral. Again, I also like it. And I like that that combines with the reserve fund as well. That's fantastic. You can also, with the judge's permission, declare that a henchman, backup character, or new character is an heir. So this is inheriting actual money or property instead of XP. Yeah, okay. When a 0 level character earns 500 XP from adventuring, he advances to first level. Blah, blah, blah. This is mostly going to be in the case of henchmen. I mean, I think you can start players at level 0 if you want, but yeah, it's mostly going to be in the case of level 0 henchmen and stuff. Okay, then we get into voyages and all that, but I think with the time remaining, let us run a mock combat. So I have Owlbear Rodeo here. We have a setup from when I was doing some D&D 5th edition module for Weird Wizard. So we'll just have this here. So here's our fighter. This is going to be Callisto. And we'll get out a goblin here. All right. And we'll go. This is the fight. This is where we engage. Callisto out in the wilderness, and he encounters a sole solitary goblin, and he's pretty certain that he can win this. Hold on, I have to get now the monstrous manual up, and we actually have to find a goblin in here. I haven't really looked at this. Goblin. Beastmen. Okay, they're all under Beastmen. Goblin. Perfect. And they do not look like what you picture. They do not look like what you might expect. This is like actual, like kind of, I don't know. This is almost like a unique goblin. It's more like a gnoll almost. They're repellent beastmen bred from dwarves and gnolls. Okay, so it's a combo of a gnoll and a dwarf. They stand 3 to 3.5 feet tall, weigh 45 pounds with strong, wiry builds. Goblin warriors are equipped with leather armor, spear, short sword, and shield. Archers equipped with scale armor, short bow, 20 arrows, and short sword. And then it goes into all their ecology, how they're normally encountered. Each goblin gang's led by a champion. Each warband led by a sub-chieftain. You know, like, might need to know all this. Because the odds of, like, you know, you encountering a sole goblin ever is pretty fucking slim. They normally are in gangs of 2d4 of them. But then a whole warband, you know, is in 2d6 gangs. Or you could have a goblin village, which is 1d10 warbands. And it's like, okay, I mean, here on this map in this hex, there is a goblin village, and there's 7 warbands comprised of, each one is comprised of 2d6 gangs, and each gang is 2d4 goblins. It's a lot of fucking goblins. And they might have 60% chance a goblin village is guarded by 5d6 dire wolves, 50% chance for 1d10 enslaved captives per warband, 75% chance of a shaman being present, and a 50% chance of a witch doctor. And a slain goblin can be harvested with animal husbandry and or healing 2 for canine teeth, which is a resource used for beguile humanoids for monster or magic research, I guess. All right, looking at their actual combat stats, though, they have a combat speed of 20, an exploration speed of 60, or a running speed. One of the two, and I think that's running, right? They have an armor class of 3. So to hit them, you know, the number becomes a 13 for our fighter instead of a 10. They have a -1 hit dice, so that means that it's a d8, but it's -1. So you could roll for every goblin, roll a d8 and -1 and see what all their individual health is. Or you always can just take an average. And the average of a d8 is a 4.5. So round that down to 4. -1 is 3. On average, a goblin will have 3 health, which is pretty weak, I'm pretty sure. I'm fairly certain this is in line with, like... Yeah, okay, so I went to the OSE SRD to look up Goblin, and they have a average HP of 3. They attack on 11 plus. They hit. So slightly worse than our, an average level 1 character. Because technically they're not a level 1 character or a level 1 unit. They're a 1-1 unit. And the damage is per their weapon. So they're equipped with a spear and short sword. Alright, and that's basically all you really need to know. They're pretty simple. So 3 hit points, 20 movement speed on just a normal move, and they hit on 11 for D6 damage, I'm pretty sure, was a spear. Let's say two-handed, but he has the shield on, so he's one-handing with his spear. Okay. So, geez, where do you begin with all this shit? So the first thing that happened, I mean, there's no surprise here or anything like that. It's just straight up combat. So the first thing would be if we wanted to declare anything before initiative, which is a defensive maneuver, like withdrawing or retreating, or casting a spell. We're not doing either of that. He's not doing either of that. So now we just roll initiative. And Carlisto has no bonus to his initiative of any kind. Barizon actually gets +1 from animal reflexes, but we just have 0. So ours is a D6, his is a D6. So our initiative is a 2, his is a 1. Pretty simple. So we go first, and we can do a full round action, we can do a move and a move, or we can do a move and a combat action. Keeping in mind that a combat action includes defending, we could do that, or I can try throwing my Francisca, which is probably what we want to do. So we can move with our encumbrance 30. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. And then as a combat action, we can attack. Which is with any kind of weapon. And that includes our thrown weapon. Because I can pull out from my belt, that's where the Francisca is. I can just pull that out as not an action. I mean, technically my long bearded axe requires 2 hands. I'm not exactly sure how that works, if I can just hold it in one hand for a moment. You know, it's a large weapon, but I don't know. Do you think you have to put away the whole axe? If you're going for realism, it doesn't really make much sense, right? I should be able to hold the two-handed axe in one hand. It's just it requires 2 hands to swing, right? That's how I would figure it. So we're just gonna throw my Francisca. So this is now his AC makes my number a 13 to hit, and we get a +2 on the roll. So I need to roll an 11 or higher for this to hit on a d20. All right, we rolled a 2. And also, we actually were rolling with a penalty because this is short. I mean, 5, 10, 15. That's short range for my throw. So then 20, 25, 30, that's medium range. So that's at a -2 penalty. This would have been max range, -4 penalty. So no way were we hitting. But we threw it. So we don't have that in the moment. And that's it. Now he gets to go. Keeping in mind that his movement is a 20 unless he runs. But yeah, I don't think he can charge either, right? The charging is a full round. And it's running speed. I feel like this second number might be running speed, because that makes way more sense, right? Oh, we found that answer for the mule. Normal load is what you can carry up to. And if you carry past that up to your max load, your speed is reduced to half. Oh, that's good to know. Now we know about the mule. Speed. So it's dungeon combat speed, and then the second number is encounter speed and dungeon running speed. Remember, the speed in the wilderness is typically multiplied by 3. Yeah, okay. So the second number is the running by full round action, running in a dungeon. In the wilderness, can move 120 feet with a movement action, 360 feet with a full round action. That seems wild to me, right? That is multiplied by 3? Dungeons are dark and cramped war zones where death lurks around every corner. In comparisons, wildernesses are wide open expanses with safe footing. Dungeons have cramped spaces and uneven terrain that slows movement, but wilderness is much more open. Therefore, combat speed and running speed are 3 times faster in the wilderness than in the dungeon. Okay, so we're going to reset this then with that in mind, because that's a big difference. So my speed then is 60. Or I can charge for 180 feet? No. My run... What? It's insane. Okay, so basically every battle map either needs a way different scale or is just... Yeah, you can cover the full fucking battle map if you're in the wilderness. Triple. So yeah. 90 feet I can walk per round. Or, 30 yards, whatever. So 90 feet. Then I don't even have to charge. I can just go 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60. Still have 30 feet left. Alright, fine. So we walked up to him. And now we're just going to swing our long bearded axe. So, pretty simple. We're just rolling the same thing we just did. We need an 11 or higher, right? Okay, there you go. Hit. And now we roll 1d10 plus 3, which will instantly kill him no matter what I roll. Yeah, 9 damage. You're dead. I mean, he's not dead. He might be just mortally wounded, but he's dead. Okay, well, that wasn't very interesting. So in that case, open terrain like that, assuming you're close enough when the encounter kicks off, initiative is huge. Whoever goes first. Because let's pretend he went first. He can still move 60 feet on a walk, or he could charge if he wanted. But 5, 10, 15, 20, 25... 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, whatever. He makes it. And then he rolls... my AC is 4, so he actually needs a 15? Now I lost my beast man. Also, this monster manual is pretty massive at 438 pages. It's got a lot of shit in it. Beastman, Hobgoblin, Goblin. Right, so he's got 11 plus, right. And he's doing D6. So yeah, he needs a 15 or higher on his roll to hit me. So he rolls his D20. He got a 16, I saw. So he does hit. And he's doing 1d6 damage. No bonuses, nothing, but 2 damage. So that means I'm at 6 out of 8. Boom. But then I would go... And there isn't much point to doing a movement action. There's definitely no reason to do any full round action. The movement action, not really, unless I wanted to change facing. Because you can't just move around an engaged opponent. Like, it doesn't work like that. You can only move if you're not engaged. And if you want to withdraw, that means that you're ending the turn not engaged with that target. And you have to declare that before you roll initiative. So you can't just be like, okay, I'm going to go around this guy and stab him in the asshole. The system does not work like that. When you're engaged, like, he's facing you and that's where you are. I mean, realistically, obviously, you might be, like, spinning around in a bit of a circle together, but the game just simulates that by saying that you're facing each other and you're engaged, and that's it. So there isn't really a movement action here. There isn't a full combat action, so basically you're just swinging. It's not particularly exciting compared to, like, 13th Age or 4th edition D&D or anything, but, you know, it works. So we'll roll... and we get a 6, so we actually miss. So that is... I mean, it doesn't matter. You're not adding really anything together. You know the number you need to roll, and that's it. I mean, you're adding 2, I guess, but still. You know the number I need, and I didn't get it, so that's that. So then you do a new round, and that's new initiative every round. So, the reason why that's usually looked down upon or frowned upon, rolling each turn, is that it's very easy to have a combatant go twice in a row. Because, like, I just went, but now if I roll higher initiative than him, I go again right away before he can go. And there's no option there. So if I roll my d6 of 4 and he gets a 1, I go again, I roll. I got a 12, which is a hit on him. Because I needed an 11 or higher. And now I do my d10 plus 3, which will decimate him. Yeah, 11 damage. He is destroyed. So that's why usually you don't reset initiative every round, and there's a lot of other alternative initiative systems that I think are probably better. But that's the way it is. Now, obviously, this is a combat that will never really occur ever. So... it's kind of useless to learning anything about how the system works or plays. But sadly, I am out of time. So we might do another mock battle next time with, like, I don't know, 5 goblins and our whole party, and just see how that plays out to really get into the system. And then I do have, like, a little tiny dungeon adventure that was written for Axe and was pay what you want on Drive Through RPG. So we may try and play through that to get a slightly better grasp of the system. But there's just so much here. Like, your brain can only take in so much info. It's hard to say. I like a lot of things of what I've seen so far, though, and I definitely feel like I'll be stealing some mechanics from Axe to put into other games. So that's always good. For now, though, my name is Mang. This has been Solo Roll Manging, Adventure Conqueror King System. I'll see you fine folks in the next part.